Welcome to Entertainment Fanatics. I'm your host, Don Wen. On today's episode, I'm interviewing Phillip Berger, who is a consultant for aspiring professionals who want to break into the entertainment industry. He also produced many projects for a variety of audiences and much more. Let's get started. Hello, Philip. Thank you for coming to my podcast today.
Thank you. Thank you for allowing me to be on your podcast.
Firstly, would you like to be called Philip, Phil, or any other variations?
Please call me Philip.
Okay. So, first question: could you tell us about yourself and your professional background?
Yes, of course. My name is Philip, as we just said. I work in film and TV production as a producer. I work in development, and then at one point in my career earlier, I was a writer. I still write sometimes, and I used to direct. I've been in the industry for 20 years, about 21 years, both in the United States and in Europe. About 14 of those years, 13, 14 of those years, I've been in Europe, both in Sweden and Norway, as well as a couple other countries in Europe. And so, yeah, that's what I do and where I've done that.
What got you interested in this field of entertainment?
Yeah, I mean, I got, that the 20 years I mentioned is my professional career, but I've been involved in it before that. I guess I got into really started liking cinema, and I was lucky to have grown up in the 90s. Starting in the early 90s, there was an explosion in the United States of independent films. And so all these, new in the 80s and 90s, a lot of new film festivals were popping up all around the United States. And I was lucky to live in a city that had a, not moderately okay sized film festival. And I started to go at a very young age, around 13, 14 years old. And also, um, when I skateboarded, but I was never that good. So I wound up becoming the guy who could skate, but held a camera to film everybody else. And that's what got me into filmmaking too. And then for high school, I applied to get into a visual and performing arts program at a public high school, and I got in there. And so I did that for a couple of years. It was more TV. There was no film, but it was TV production and media arts. And then I went to film school, and then I've been interested in this since a very young age.
You mentioned about some film festivals. Which were your favorite film festival you have attended in the past?
Oh, that's a hard one. I I haven't, because of many factors, including COVID and a bunch of different things. I haven't really been to a film festival. I have, but not like I used to. Honestly, I think they're all really good. They're very different than they used to be, because of just how things have changed. I haven't been to Sundance in a very long time, but the Sundance that I went to is a very different Sundance than I went to now, because things have shifted, and as they always do. But I would say my favorite film festivals I've been to is, of course, the original ones I went to, which I haven't been to those in a very long time, and that's the Florida Film Festival, and that's in Orlando, Florida. Um, and I have been to the big ones like Sundance and Cannes, and I like them a lot. But one other festival that's very dear to my heart is the Berlin Film Festival, and also called the Berlinale, and that's in Berlin. It's usually in January, February every year. It's kind of one of the few festivals that kick off the year. And it's a market for films from all over the world to kind of get known, and they have a lot of great programs for students and for first-time filmmakers. I was a part of their talent campus once or twice, definitely once. I had done a workshop there. It's one of my favorite festivals, the Berlin Film Festival.
What were some challenges you faced when first getting started?
What are some
That's
challenges that I face now? I mean, the thing about filmmaking is that, and TV, but primarily film, is that it is an art, it is a craft, but it is the most expensive art form that exists on Earth and in human history. You can't you can make a feature film for low cost, but you're going to be struggling. It's not like painting or photography where you can pick up a, you know, a can you can make your own canvas and you can make your own paint and you can just paint. This is something where you need, usually for most stories, you're going to need a film crew, you're going to need everybody. So the biggest challenge I think ever is at first breaking in is understanding what you want to do in the industry. I always suggest if you don't know what you want to do, then just to work a lot of positions, usually at a very low level. It's called a production assistant. But the bigger problem is if you know what you want to do when you enter the industry, that can make it even harder because it's just, you know, if pretty much a large majority of people want to write or direct or just direct. Writing you can do from your home, writing you can do sitting in a cafe, writing you can do sitting in a park. Um, Directing you can't just wake up one day and say you want to direct or produce. You have to have a something physical to do, and that's making a film. And so I would say the challenge in the very beginning of my career was gaining respect and gaining kind of a foot into the industry. And I think my now that I produce, my biggest the pretty much the only challenge I'm facing now, which is the biggest challenge, is getting financing for your film, getting money enough to make your film. And you know, in the cheap end of things, which most people don't realize, to make a movie, a feature film, a full-length film, on the cheaper end of things, it's about I would say $2 to $4 million to make a movie, and that's the cheap end. You can make movies for 50,000. You will see movies made for 50, 60, 100,000. Those are usually very what I call tiny movies. They're, you know, one or two characters, one location, very minimal, and they can be great. That's not that they're such a low budget doesn't mean they're bad. They're just a struggle because if you want to expand the story at all, you have to bring more people on. You have to have, you know, more equipment, and there's going to be longer days. So a typical feature film will shoot, the magic kind of used to be, things have changed now, is around 28 days of shooting, and that's not including the weekends. So it's about 5 or 6 weeks. And that's always, those films are, you can struggle at a lower budget, but it's going to run you over $1 million. And that's including the production itself and the post-production and everything else. And then comes marketing and everything else. So when you see a movie that was made for a very low budget of $2 million or $1.5 million, but made 60, $70 million on the, you know, in the box office, you have to understand that you are not seeing the full budget because you're not seeing a lot of times the marketing budget, which includes, you know, posters, which includes ads on social media, and it includes public relations releases. So I think going back to your question, the struggle I had in the beginning is getting into the industry. The struggle I have now is getting films made from the financial point of view.
Okay. What got you started in the Start with 8 program?
Oh yes, the Start with Eight program. So I had moved. I had the unfortunate timing. You know, this industry is about your talent. It's about who you know, and it's about your timing. And timing is the hardest because it's something you completely cannot control. I moved to Los Angeles on around March 6th, 2020, which was a week before
wow.
COVID lockdown. And so I had knew a couple. I mean, I knew a lot of people in LA already, just from my school and from friends and from people I had worked with. And then I had this person I had known, but wasn't that acquainted with, and they were starting this program, because the idea that this was around the same time that, you know, Me Too had just happened, and there was a big wanting for DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusivity in the industry, but nothing was really happening. And so a few people had started initiatives, one through Color Creatives. There was a few other initiatives that were really great and really big. And then somebody I knew named Took had started this program with, I can't remember who else, Start with Eight. And first I had gotten two mentees at the kind of the beginning of COVID lockdown. and now I can't remember at the top of my head who they were. And then I got eight who started with eight. And so, which was overwhelming. I didn't realize, again, sometimes you don't read the fine print that start with eight meant you're getting eight mentees. I had no problem because it was COVID and there was a lot of time and great opportunity. But yeah, that's how I kind of got started. I got a total of 10 or a little bit more mentees, and I focus mostly on working with writers and people wanting to get into what's called development, and usually the development focused on writing and developing stories. And that idea that the outcome or the results of that program start with eight, and the other programs is to kind of put your mouth when their money is or your labor is, and to try to really help bring underrepresented talent behind the camera and in front. Sorry, it was primarily behind the camera. So I was lucky enough to have a couple of my mentees stick around with me, and we still talk about once a month or once every other month. Yeah, so that's that program.
What made you want to start your own production company?
Well, I technically don't have one now. I had them primarily when I lived in Europe, and that was because it's about control. It's about things are different over there with funding because it's a lot mostly it'll be public funds from governmental fund or from a film institute or for local funds. But it's gaining control. It's gaining the ability to kind of make what you want instead of going to a production company and asking them to make what you want. You can start making things you want at a production company. You also have some sort of control, and you have some sort of ways to do that, because the system used to be pretty much until a long part of the beginning of our history of our craft of film, it was mostly studio based. Like, you had to work through a studio. There were independent studios, and then they started getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and now it's kind of a normal thing. So it's yeah, it's control. It's wanting to make what you want, be your own essential gatekeeper, and not having to answer to anybody else. But currently I don't have one. I work independently. I don't have my own production company per se. But I don't have, yeah, I kind of do have a production company. It's not the same as I used to, because I used to have other people working with me, because now it's just solely me. So I guess I do have a production company. But yeah, that's usually why people want to start their own production company. They want to start seeing films or shows that they are not able to see, that are not getting made. They want to take new directions. They want to, establish different working conditions. It's all about kind of the independence of starting it, and that's very capitalist world.
Uh, did you get any help from anyone at first, or did you start from scratch?
I would say it depends. You start on your own. You have to kind of, it's very hard to break in sometimes, because you have to kind of know where you're going to break in, and then you can do, the traditional ways, send in a resume, send in apply, but that's just not how things work. Usually you have to find somebody who's worked on a set. If you want to start off as a production assistant to kind of understand what you want to do, then you have to find those people. I was lucky, I started working randomly. I was interning at a production company. I was production coordinating kind of in the very beginning at a commercial production company. They were also doing short format. And then I was lucky. I hated it. I couldn't really expand. And then I had a friend who worked on a TV show that brought me on. And then he worked permanently on the TV show, and then he started getting the other jobs that were in indie films, and I started working more in indie films. But yeah, it's very difficult to start. I think things are a bit different now with, for example, my film school, where I think they're placing people after they graduate. And my film school at the time did not. But also at the time I graduated, which is quite a long time ago, that the things were different. The industry was much smaller than it is now. And I also graduated kind of at the tail end of this American indie explosion, which will hopefully come back now after these strikes and COVID. But there was a downturn and a lot of focus went to TV, but in the 1990s and the early 2000s, we're still in the middle of the indie explosion, so I was lucky there. But now, I mean, now I really don't know. I think, again, knowing what's kind of really ridiculous to me is that I understand it, but people are being interviewed and having to send in resumes to become a production assistant. And to me, that is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard, because production assistance is technically, not technically, it is the lowest position you could have on a film set. And there's absolutely no reason why why you should have to send in a resume or be interviewed for it. I think that's crazy. I understand what they're trying to do. They want people interested, but that's the whole point. It's like production assistant, you start learning, you learn from a set point of view, which is not the whole film process, but is the large bulk of it. You're the filming process. You learn what it's about. You learn if you can take and you can handle the pace. If it's something you really want to do, you can also intern at production company. You would go through all the process. You would be in the production, the pre-production, the raising finance and development, and you're also in the production. But then you also get to see a bit of the post-production. But things have changed, and they are literally changing all the time. And now we just came off of a pandemic. We just came off of a series of strikes. There might be another strike this year. We'll find out in July more, but things are changing. So you have to keep your ear to the ground. There's these, outlets, we usually call them trades. I don't know what they're called anymore. And those used to be the newspapers, and now everything's online, obviously. So you can check out Deadline and Variety and Hollywood Reporter, and there's a few more blogs to find out what's happening in the industry, who's making what does it look like? They are legacy studios about to shutter, Paramount to be bought. There's big things happening. So it's even when you're in the starting phase, it's good to get an idea of the industry. If you want to be more on the creative side of things, maybe you don't have to realize as much. If you want to be a cinematographer, it's all about what you want to be in the industry. If you want to be a I kick myself in the butt all the time because my education, they kept telling me I was a cinematographer, not a director. I should have pursued. Because the good thing with cinematography is you become better in each part of anything with film and TV, but any art, you become better with time and practice. But as a cinematographer, we're lucky today to have you have your phone. You can go out and you can shoot people with your phone and learn angles better. I mean, your phone has no lenses on it, but you can actually buy lenses for your phone. You can borrow a friend's SLR camera that also takes video, that takes HD video, and you can go out and you can shoot nature. You can bring your friends out to the park and during sunset and work with sunset, and you're just going to get better and better. So it's like cinematography, if you want to be a cinematographer, I say there's no really reason to read the trades. You should be reading photography magazines and studying art. And so it's very different. If you want to become a director, you need to know about the art of direction, the art of working with actors, and there's books about it, but you really need to do hands-on things. If you want to become a writer, all you got to do is you got to write every day, and you got to read more books, but you also have to read a lot of scripts. If you want to become a producer, the only way you can become a producer is to have the experience on a production, and learning all the ropes, learning the logistic as well as the creative. Some producers tend to only do strictly logistic or strictly creative. I say it's either or. You have to have that combo. So it really matters what you want to do and what you're liking. If you do not know what you want to do on a film or TV film and TV production, then I always recommend, of course, working your way up or working as what's called a set PA, set production assistant. Then you really can see, oh, those guys over there, they're the gaffers who work with electricity. Those guys over there are the grips. Those people over there do costume and hair and makeup. That's interesting. Oh, what does that person do? They have a script in front of them. Things have changed now, but they have an iPad in front of them or a script, and they're the ones who are called when there's a gap in the script. They're called script supervisor and make sure that the script is being followed and covered properly. So there's like many different aspects of it. And then what I also used to tell people, things have changed now, is that now there's a lot more film schools than there used to be. There used to be very few number of film schools. So if you can't get into film school, people would always ask me, what should I study? And it depends on what you want to do. If you are dead set on becoming a cinematographer, then you only need to study photography and art. Always study those two. If you want to become a filmmaker, a director, or even a writer, if you're in college, I say study two things if there's no film school. I say study creative writing, the art of writing, the art of storytelling. Regardless if you're a writer or a director, you need to take that. And then always study art history. And I know that sounds weird for being a filmmaker, a TV maker, or a documentarian, but art will show you how humans express themselves. And art history is usually very encompassing. You usually have to study at least 2 semesters of it in school. Community college offers it. They pretty much offer it everywhere in America and the world. But you will study very ancient art, how our ancestors going back to when they lived in caves worked with light and worked with art up until modern day and everything in between. And you'll learn about those things that I know, but they're like, and then start watching a lot of movies. But it depends. Again, if you're a cinematographer, yes, watch a movie. A filmmaker, yes. If you're a producer, sure, not as much. You got to learn the ropes. But everybody can benefit from watching movies. And I always tell people, especially young people today, that it's just as important to watch a movie from the 1920s as it is from the 1990s. Because at every point, there's a golden age of cinema, they say, is from the 40s until the 60s, 70s. And then there's a golden age of American independence, which is the 80s, late 80s and all of the 90s and part of the 2000s. But when you start watching movies like that and TV shows, older TV shows, you start to learn that how the art of it existed back then at such a different, because they didn't have all the technology we had. They had film. It was actually very hard to record sound. That's why it took so long for sound to come. It was hard to A, record it, and B, put it on a film strip. And then you see like early, sound in the 30s and the 40s. They had these big, almost like a big truck that was only for sound because sound recording was new. So there's a period of our film where there is no sound. And the first, sound came in the 1920s, the late 1920s, but all the film that came before that had no sound. And in the United States, we had codes, and there's pre-code films and post-code films. Pre-code films, you could kind of film whatever you want. Post-code films meant that they were very censored. We actually had censorship in America that was done by people. So it's just like study your history, get acquainted with films. If you want to become a writer, what does writers do? You got to write a lot, you got to read a lot. So read a lot of scripts. They're available online for free. You can get thousands of scripts online for free. Might not be the film you want to get it for, but you're going to get it. And be resourceful. In this day and age, we have the internet, we have social media. If you don't have a phone or can afford a phone, there's a library. So there's ways to find out what to do that older people didn't have when we were very young, very limited access. But be resourceful. Film is an art. People sometimes expect a lot more. They're like, well, I wanted this, this, and that. And it's like you can say the same with painting. It's like nobody's stopping you from buying a canvas or getting a piece of paper and start drawing. It's the same thing with film. It's just a lot more expensive and a lot more encompassing, that you got to be resourceful. You got to figure out things on your own. It's an art. It's a skill, it's a craft, but it's also an art. All of those things are art, but it's not like, you're studying economics, and you need to work your way up. You do need to work your way up, but there's nothing stopping you and your friends from making a film together. And also, I tell writers, because I work a lot with writers, they love, applying for awards, applying for competitions. And I think that's good in some way, but I always tell them, you can win all the best awards in the world. And if your script has never been made in a film, the award means nothing, absolutely nothing. So if you're a writer, for example, you want to get your project made. So either you and your friends, you can write it and you and your friends can make it together. But I always tell people too, if you're in a smaller town or even a bigger town, look for small schools or community colleges that have a film program and say, hey, I'm a writer. I would like to work with you all, and send them your writing work, send your friends your writing, give notes on you. You have to be basically. I'm taking a long way to say this. You have to be very resourceful in this industry. You have to be curious and you have to be resourceful, or you will not get anywhere.
Dang.
Okay.
Dude, you answered like a lot of our questions.
Yeah.
It's funny. I had to go through and like edit these. Thank you very much for that. That
Yeah.
was that was very insightful.
Yeah. If you could change anything about the entertainment industry, what would it be?
That's quite difficult and quite easy at the same time. I would say definitely it would be access. So again, as I said, that if you want to make, I talked mostly about film, and that is mostly the world. I was in TV and I still do TV things, but TV world is very in shambles, you could say, straight up right now. TV is different. You can't just want to make a TV. TV, regardless, costs tens of thousands of dollars, or sorry, tens of millions of dollars to make, and it has to be broadcast. You have to have a broadcaster or streaming network. But for film and TV, I would change a couple of things. I would change the way money works and happens in the industry. That especially in independent film and even studio film, it's been taken over by a lot of sorry, I'm having an allergy moment. It's taken over by a lot of venture capital, which it kind of always has, but also Wall Street money and Silicon Valley money. There's nothing wrong with that money, but it's who's behind that money. So there's people having a lot of money, but expecting a lot of things that are not real. I expect I think I would change kind of two things. I would change the gatekeeping, like the gatekeeping of what gets made. It's not who, for me, it's not who's making it. I don't really actually care who's making it. I care about what's made, what's being made. I would change that, and that includes what's called IP, which is intellectual property. Pretty much everything in our industry now in this country is they always wanted IP based, because if that's IP based, meaning it's based on a book, it's based on an article, it's based on a film that it's a remake, it's a reboot. And that's why you're seeing everything on TV and film is based on a book, it's based on a prior movie, it's based on a prior TV show. It could even be based on a board game, a Disney ride. And they do this because that is for the venture capitalists saying, we want guarantees that this will go somewhere. That doesn't guarantee anything, but for them, it's a guarantee, and it's a guarantee for everybody else putting their money in. Because it's everything's about money. Because it is, again, it's a very expensive art form. It's not painting, it's not photography, it's not even sculpting, or massive sculpture, which costs a lot. It doesn't cost as much as a movie. You could build a tower that's going to cost you less than making a movie. So it's a very encompassing. So I would change that. I've heard people say they want to get money out of film. If you get money out of film, you're not going to be able to make a movie. That's the breaks. Unfortunately, there's crew you have to pay, there's equipment you have to pay, there's spaces, people's energy and time. If you want to shoot in at somebody's house, you got to pay them so that they can go to the hotel for the day. It all costs money. We know that. But it's how that money is run, and where it's coming from doesn't matter. It's just what is the opportunity for people. So you're seeing a lot of things with money going to people with no experience, which is fine. But then there's people that with a lot of experience that can't get there. So it's kind of like reorganizing the money and reorganizing the people who are in charge of saying where that money goes to. I would change, and I think the majority of the industry would agree with me. And it's not getting rid of venture capital money. It's not about getting rid of Wall Street or Silicon Valley money. It's just like how that is pipelined into movies, because you have a lot of people with great stories to tell and experience, and people with not a lot of experience but have a closer connection to where that money and gatekeeping is. And so it's kind of just reorganizing that in a way that is worthwhile and makes sense for everyone.
And finally, where can the audience find your work?
Where can the audience find my work? Right now, I have a lot of things in the pipeline. You can go to my website. There's not that much. There's some of my old kind of short format and commercial work on my website, and I've done some, I don't know, I actually don't remember if it's on my website. I'm redoing my website, but I have some more short format projects from my past on my website, or at least on my Vimeo, that I need to put. I would say, to answer that in a more straightforward way, stay tuned.
Okay, and thank you for taking a busy time to talk with me on my podcast.
Absolutely, thank you.
To check out more of Philip's work, visit his website at phillipberger.tv. To stay up to date with Entertainment Fanatics, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Entertainment Fanatics Pod. That's at Entertainment Fanatics Pod.